Hey guys, how's it going? Lee here. Now, as you would have seen in my previous video in my portfolio reveal where I told you about all my stocks and why I've sold them or why I'm selling them or if I'm holding on to them, which was, I hope, an interesting learning experience for yourself because it was for me, especially reflecting on it. But for me, for the time being and moving forward, I will only be investing in US equities. Yes, I've opened up an account with stake. Referral down below there if you want a free stock. All you have to do is find your account with 50 Aussie dollars. And it is for anybody who's in Brazil, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia as well to invest over in the US. So now that I'm talking about US stocks, I'm a little bit more free. I've got a lot more news to refer to and just a lot more content that I can potentially put up. And so one of the first stocks I'm actually covering in my US equities series is actually Facebook, part of the FANG stocks as well. And so today we're going to be going over Facebook, what its business model is like, growth prospects in the future, and what it's like as an investment prospect. Because hint, yes, I actually have bought some Facebook stocks as one of our first few stocks moving into the US equity space. And one of the reasons why I'm covering FANG stocks is that, well, there's really no getting around it. I mean, a lot of the services and products I use are actually from the FANG stocks themselves, or the ones that my workplace uses, all a part of FANG also. So for me, not to invest into something that I use and have seen progress over time would be rather contradictory and kind of odd, especially when they have such great balance sheets and they've got all the engineers to help with their tech development over time, as opposed to these small ASX stocks, which, well, have very little in terms of growth unless you're investing in buy now, pay later. So anyways, guys, before I start, obviously leave me a like, a comment down there below. Are you moving over to US equities? Are you already invested in US equities? But yes, let's get right there and started in Facebook. So obviously we all know Facebook as one of the premier social media platforms, but it's not just social media, and actually they have made their acquisitions for some of the other platforms that they own over time. Just Instagram, for example, in 2012 they bought Instagram for $1 billion and have added value to it over time and have made it the giant, the colossal giant that it is right now. They've also made an acquisition of WhatsApp in 2014 for $16 billion, 4 billion of which was in cash and 12 billion was in shares. Now, Facebook shares in 2014 in comparison to now, you can imagine whoever got those Facebook shares quite well off in terms of wealth. Bruh. And one of their other big purchases, which a lot of people don't generally either know or talk about, is actually Oculus for about $2 billion in cash and shares. And in terms of cash flow, it really hasn't paid off in terms of hasn't actually made any money as of yet, but the technology behind it and the stuff that it could develop into the future as another source of revenue is, well, going to be quite big if they actually pull it off. And based on the information I'm going to be talking about later on, I have a feeling they're going to do so. So the best way I think to understand a business model is to first touch on its revenue, right? So let's talk about how it makes money and how much money it actually makes. So in terms of revenue, social media is no different to TV, as they both sell ads and are there to retain our attention, whether it's through TV shows, through social media posts, using the platform to communicate with friends and family, like you see in Facebook Messenger, which is quite popular, or even WhatsApp. But instead of primetime viewing, what we're paying for essentially is targeting a specific demographic that'll help boost our conversions to our products or services that we're trying to sell. Now, if we're looking at revenue alone, just to give some perspective as to how big Facebook actually is, it made $70 billion in revenue. That's right, not 70 million, 700 million, 7 billion, $70 billion in revenue. Now that's a ton of money. That's a lot of money. Now, what's interesting is that there's no clear indication from Facebook as to how much of it was from Instagram and how much is from Facebook. But according to a few sources, Instagram made about $20 billion alone. YouTube ad revenue from Google made even less than Instagram on its $20 billion, which is mind-blowing to me because, well, this is on YouTube and it's more fit for longer form content, and Instagram just smashed that right out of the water. I guess you could place more ads just because you're just looking at posts and pictures and scrolling, and every 3 scrolls, maybe you might get hit with an ad, which is much quicker than YouTube. And so in terms of revenue, I don't know if Instagram's looking to employ more ads or I don't know what they're looking to do, but what I have noticed is that they've recently put in a little e-commerce store button at the very bottom of the app, which is, it's getting me quite excited actually. What that potentially is saying is, well, now that we've got all your attention, we've got your time that you spent on this app, and they would have analytics all about that. they already target specific ads for, if you've looked at towels recently, they'll target towel ads towards you guys. If you looked at dogs recently, it could be a pet bed that's targeted towards you. But now they actually control the e-commerce portion of that as well by having a button down there for you to browse for things to buy, and they give you suggestions as well. Well, it's not hard to imagine that you go looking at, highlight reels, which is essentially stolen from TikTok, stories, which is taken from Snapchat, or just the Instagram post that they had originally, and then you go, I feel like doing a bit of shopping. Maybe I can find something that this influencer that I just saw just had. Click over to the commerce button and bang, you're still in the app, you haven't left anything, but now you're able to buy it at the same place. And so I definitely see Instagram continuing to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's taking much more of a market share as it continues to steal features that other platforms currently are killing it with, especially TikTok. Now, revenue is all well and good, but it's more important to actually know what its net income is. So what are we left after the taxes, after the expenses, after everything else? What are we actually left with? Well, they're left with about $18 billion in net income. And that means that the business is still quite capital intensive by nature. Remember, we've got $70 billion and we've come down to $18 billion. But in saying that $18 billion, now I'm from Australia, obviously, and our biggest bank's net profit, that's Commonwealth Bank of Australia, they make $8 billion in net profit, right? Which they pay out in dividends and whatnot, but $8 billion versus $18 billion, and this is USD as well. It's just a cash flow machine. They know how to make money and they know how to make a lot of it. Just like JPow, the money printer, Facebook can print money also. Now, although the revenue is quite high, the major problem with this is that it's actually quite capped in terms of growth, which we'll talk about right now. Now, growth for social media generally means more users, right? And especially more users on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. So the more you can get them on the platform and the longer you can get them using it, the better the metrics actually look over time. And it becomes especially more difficult, especially when you're already on the top of your games. So for example, Facebook has 2.7 billion monthly active users. It becomes a little bit less when you talk about daily, but still that's a lot. That's about a third of the world's population. Now, when you've already got a third of the world's population, and understand that also a huge portion of the world's population still doesn't even have a mobile phone or internet, but so when you've got a large portion of them who already use Facebook, it's very, very hard to grow any further, because unless the world starts growing in population and people start getting mobile phones and plans and all that type of stuff, it's very difficult to actually even get them onto the platform, let alone be an active user. Now, generally when we talk about growth, the company can provide information around growth in two ways. They can either provide it with raw numbers, and if the raw numbers don't look that good, like for example, if you grew from maybe 50 users to 100 users, it doesn't look that good when you've only got 100 users on your platform. But if you say, we grew 100%, and then the people who want to know what the numbers are start digging and go, oh, you went from 50 to 100, that's 100%, or even from 1 to 2 users, that's 100%. Some companies might end up using percentages as opposed to numbers, and numbers as opposed to percentages if, it goes either way. And one definitely looks more impressive than the other. You can either show, absolute dominance when you use numbers, especially like in Facebook's example, or you can go percentages if you're a smaller, especially micro cap company or a small cap company, and you're starting to build yourself over time. And so for Facebook, growth becomes another question, because you've got the financial media people, they're coming after Facebook. You've got analysts coming after Facebook and saying, well, look, their growth isn't going to be that high just because they already have such a large population of the world using their services, and this is their revenue. So unless they grow any further to grow the revenue, or they bring in a different revenue source, it's going to be really hard in terms of growing themselves as a business, which really only leaves Facebook with one option. Because they've already got all this attention from all these people using their services, they really have no other choice but to bring in another stream of revenue. And we kind of was talking about this beforehand when we were talking about Oculus, right? They need another stream, another platform, another hardware or service that comes in to bring in a different form of revenue. Speaking of which, they really need to find a way to monetize WhatsApp, because it hasn't really been done really well, but they also need to be able to do so by keeping the users on the platform. So that's something that they've got to figure out. I think they were talking about charging businesses, having consumers contact businesses directly, and then businesses being able to use those analytics, which is really no different than at the moment when you're able to post ads. You're grabbing the analytics and the data from Facebook to be able to target your specific ads to the specific audience that you want it to get to. So it could be another form of revenue. We'll see if they actually pull it off. And staying on the subject about forming another stream of revenue, I really think that we've got to look at the Oculus thing again, okay? It's really a space that's currently developing. There is really no big practical use for it at the moment, but what they do have is they have Oculus, which They've developed some hardware around, you can actually buy it and play some of their games that they have on the Oculus hardware. But what we have to remember that is Oculus is not just a form of hardware, but also another form of entertainment to gain and retain our attention. Now, if there's one thing that Facebook and Instagram is good at, is keeping us in the app for quite some time. But in terms of direction and where it's actually heading in the future, Mark Zuckerberg actually had an interview with MKBHD looking at what he actually sees for the product and the actual technology has installed in the future. Here's a short clip.
Rolling around on my desk and my hand is getting close to a water bottle, where today you don't feel the water bottle until you touch it, but it's possible in AR or VR that we can provide some kind of sense, so as you start getting close to an object, you start feeling some kind of resistance or some sense that you're near something.
Now, based on Mark's vision, you can see that this can absolutely become another form of revenue for the company and can take off quite well, especially if you're able to interact with these content creators that you normally see through the screen, but it feels like they're right next to you. That's going to take it to a whole nother level in terms of media consumption that we haven't been seen before. At the moment, we already see a lot of people spending time on YouTube watching their content creators and even Twitch watching live streamers. Now imagine if they were right next to you. That's just another level of interaction, and if they pull it off, it's going to be big. And I think this type of technology is kind of winner takes all. It's going to be one product. If one product pulls it off really well, they're going to be dominating the market essentially. It's going to be the software, it's going to be the hardware, it's going to be how they incorporate it from business to business. Not only in gaming, but can I use it in real estate? Can I go through a walkthrough of a home with that VR headset on? Can I be in meetings and feel like as though the person I'm talking to is right next to me with those VR headsets on? So it has multiple uses. And if Oculus can get there first, my God, you're gonna see Facebook stock go through the roof. Reminds me of Tesla, actually. However, in terms of Oculus, there are some challenges for it also. Obviously, it's in its growth phase for Facebook, and which is why Mark is plowing a lot of money into it at the moment. And they really only have had 20 game titles that have reached over $1 million in sales. Which, would still suggest that there is demand for the game, demand for the hardware at the moment. Now, I can see this stuff definitely taking off in the future if you've got the right celebrity, the right online personality to promote the right game. Think of, Ninja with Fortnite, Among Us. There's so many games that have taken off based on the virality of the online influencers. Now, if we're looking at challenges for Facebook, well, there's actually a lot more than just their potential growth. We've got Senate inquiries, which Mark's attended a lot to, answering some challenging questions and also some really silly questions. We've also had Facebook being boycotted in terms of their big advertisers. Now, this was based around, them pushing certain narratives through the feed and whatnot and publishing certain things that, weren't socially acceptable or whatever, which led to big names like CVS, Starbucks, Microsoft, Unilever, and Coca-Cola saying that they will not be advertising on the platform. It's saying that that's only a few names, but then you have like hundreds and thousands of others that are still continuing to advertise on their platform, which is why you see their revenue continue to grow. And I really don't think if a future boycott comes along, just as big as this one had, will really affect their platform, because at the end of the day, it's one of the cheapest forms of direct targeted marketing that any business and company can use to push their product. And recently, actually, due to the Rona, we've had a lot of small to medium-sized businesses actually move their services onto Facebook. And Facebook has definitely supported this. They've put out a lot of workshops and stuff online for small businesses to get started. There's templates and stuff that you can actually just click and then they create a template for you and you can just fill in that type of information for you. And so I feel like as though Facebook is really going to be the mediator, the middle person, the middleman, to really facilitate a lot of commerce, e-commerce, or even small businesses like your local small businesses. They'll facilitate a lot of these transactions, and maybe there's a delivery service like an Uber or a DoorDash or whatever that goes in between, or you just go to pick it up from that place, which really takes out the need to call up the place and actually make the order, or from the venue, the restaurant, to actually have a website, which could be quite taxing for a small business who maybe isn't as IT savvy. And this isn't just coming from my own opinions and thoughts. Sheryl Sandberg and also Mark Zuckerberg have talked about medium to small businesses in their phone conferences, which I've really enjoyed listening into to see what the future of Facebook is going to look like. So in terms of challenges around growth, I'm not too concerned about that because they have all of this data, they have all this information, they have all of this attention for them to be able to monetize in some form of way, which is why I bought the stock in the first place. I use the services myself. I know so many people who do also, who can't even get off it. I delete Instagram every other week, just to let you know, which is probably why I don't see ads quite as often, but I do use Messenger on a daily basis. So anyways, that's it guys. Let me know down below. Are you using Facebook? Do you have US equities? Do you have Facebook as a stock? Would you buy Facebook? anything. Just leave anything in the comment section down below. And if you don't know what to comment, just give me an apple. Give me an apple emoji down below. I hope you enjoy the first episode here of my covering the US equities. Really enjoyed actually talking about it and going through something that I personally use myself. But that's it, guys. I'll catch you later. Cheers.